Good afternoon, Carl.
Hello, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
I'm good. Super good,
I
actually.
see you have found Zen with the blue couch. It just seems very nicely nestled behind you now,
Floating. It's floating in
floating.
the air. I've
Yeah,
got
just
it
for
up on I've got it up on stools, just for those of you who aren't can't see it. Michael always makes such a big deal about this couch that I finally brought into my office and put it up on stools because I'm at a standing desk. I had it tipped up against the wall when we started, but it fell over, so we didn't want to do that. So the blue couch is back.
but you're trying to troll us with the blue couch now.
It's, I'm going to hang it from the ceiling one of these episodes.
Fantastic. Just record in front of it and not beneath it. Just
Exactly.
just to be safe.
Giant talking blue couch.
Actually losing to a blue couch accident would be a little too meta for us.
That's right. That's right. Plus, my wife would be so upset that the blue couch got injured.
That's true. That's true. You'd dent it with your head. That wouldn't be good.
Exactly. All right. What are we talking about?
So we had this great discussion last episode around like what happens when you're a lifestyle practice, but there's some stuff you don't want to do, but you don't want to be stuck with kind of the burdens of managing staff and managing people, and sort of talked about like, look, you can delegate, you can tuck in. There's other ways to do this. You also just find the person who really wants to be, your alter ego complementary you. And like, I'm going to be tied to an office or tied to a person, the rest like that can sometimes just be a limiting belief in our head. It doesn't always actually have to be that way as a constraint. But I realize like there's kind of a different version of this challenge that I've seen crop up for a number of advisors over the years. And it resonates for me because I went through a version of this in my own journey, which is, I spent the first almost 10 years of my career in a position where I had a lot of management responsibility, like manage, teach, and train and develop other people. And figured out I am not the best at that. I'm not even particularly all that good at it. Like, give me a large audience to teach and train, fine. Give me an individual person for whom I'm supposed to do regular quarterly performance reviews. And this is not my happy space and my natural place of operating. And so that led me down a road for many years of saying, I really want to run something that looks more like a lifestyle practice. Because I just don't want it, like if I grow it, there's more people and then I have to manage them. And I don't really like or wanted to manage a lot of people. So I'm just not going to grow that big and then I don't have to deal with that. And there was a breakthrough moment for me several years ago, which came from a book, as many of my moments do, because I read a lot of books. So I draw a lot of inspiration from books. And it was a book called Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman. Yeah. And the theme of Rocket Fuel is that when you look at a lot of the most successful businesses out there that were driven by like really high profile visionaries like Walt Disney, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, there's sort of this like a visionary person that gets put up on the pedestal. And the whole thesis and point of Rocket Fuel is that if you actually drill down, what you find out is that none of those companies actually became big just because of their visionaries, and not just because they had teams that built and did great stuff, which they did, but that all of those were actually duos. Walt Disney had his brother Roy. Roy was the businessman. Walt, I think, almost bankrupted Disney 3 different times. He was a horrible manager of the business. Roy kept the wheels on the bus and got the thing running. Steve Jobs had Wozniak. Bill Gates had Ballmer. That a lot of the time, we happen to see the visionary folks because often they're sort of the ones at the top or out front, but that a lot of great businesses get built because they're actually pairs. There's duos. There's someone that's great in that visionary role. And then there's someone who's great at taking all the crazy stuff in the visionary's head and actually making it into systems and process and people and structure and all the stuff it takes to actually do and deliver that. And they're good at that because the visionary is just good at visioning things and may not actually be all that great at translating it into the rest, or they don't like doing all the rest because they just like being visiony people. And so the as the book tells it, like rocket fuel, like literally like blast things into space. Explosive rocket fuel is built from two different chemicals that individually are relatively inert. When you mix them together, it makes very large explosions. So when you get the two together, the explosion is wonderful. So that's the rocket fuel analogy. But it kind of set this light bulb moment off for me that I had spent years and years saying, I don't want to make this thing bigger, because deep down, I just didn't want to have to manage people myself and deal with all the stuff that goes with that. And very much kind of the answer and the point of the book is you don't have to do that. As we were sort of saying for last episode, like these are choices that we make to do it that way, but that's not the only way to do it. And the whole framework that rocket fuel gives is, for every visionary, there's they call them integrators.
Yep.
Who like taking all that stuff and putting it into practice. And even as I thought about a lot of the, very successful advisory firms that I know, and just advisors that have built much larger businesses, a lot of them, either it was a founder and a right-hand person who went along with them the whole journey. And the truth is, like, the right-hand person was the manage people, get it built, create the systems and process, because the visiony person didn't like doing that. Or they were built with partnerships. And there's like the public-facing partner and the not so public-facing partner. Because the not so public-facing partner is the integrator type, just likes building and putting all that stuff together and doesn't even want to be out there doing all the rest of the stuff. They just like building and creating teams and cultures and systems and process and all the stuff that it takes to make the business work and execute. And so I thought it would be an interesting discussion to take kind of the next step, right? There's the advisor who's afraid to hire because they want to run a lifestyle practice and doesn't necessarily want to have to manage people. And then there's the advisor who chooses a lifestyle practice solely because they're afraid to have to manage people. And it's not actually because they want to build a lifestyle practice. They may have ideas and dreams of doing something bigger that impacts more, but they've shoehorned themselves around, well, I'm not good at managing people. I don't want to manage people, so I can't do this. So I'm wondering, like, does that resonate for you? Is that something you've seen in conversation with advisors as well?
Yeah, well, I've seen it personally, right? And I think one thing that I think you didn't mention explicitly, but I think it's important, all these conversations we've had about lifestyle practices, that there is a question that should be asked, that like, is it a false argument anyway? Like, deciding to grow in terms of having more freedom, more income, that's the goal, which I'm fine with that goal, by the way. More freedom, more income, more impact. That does not mean you have to, right? Like, it doesn't mean you have to get more staff, bigger, more headaches, more management, more like that. It's not necessarily that those things aren't necessarily correlated. They are historically, we've always thought this way, which is why I think rocket fuel was such a breakthrough for me too. Like, I remember reading about the early stuff on traction and the entrepreneurial operating system and just being like, whoa, there's people like an integrator? I didn't know that existed, because I had never sort of understood that. I just knew that I couldn't seem to run a business, right? I couldn't seem to do all the things. It was like, I would try to grit my teeth and make myself do those things, the things that you're supposed to do, the thingy things when you run a business, the business things, right? Like, yep. I would try to grit my teeth and make myself do it, and I couldn't. All I wanted to do was create stuff. That's it, at the expense of the business sometimes. So I love that idea and so when I discovered that, because we've got a team here that operates exactly that way, and it's so powerful. It reminds me a little bit too of this idea that that you can outsource being in charge. I love that. Like, and I first learned that from something that Larry Swedroe said. So Larry, what would Larry's title be now? I just think of him as king, but what would his title be now? What's his title
gosh,
now?
I'm not even sure what his formal title is. Chief Guru of all investment things.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I know he's been around at Buckingham forever. And I remember he said to me once, and Larry, I probably got 3 or 4 things that Larry has said to me that have just like clicked and really stuck around for a long time. But one of the things he said was when he first got, and I may be getting this wrong, but my recollection is that when he first joined Buckingham in the early days, he told them, put me in charge of nothing. Right? Like and I know he's evolved a little bit, but he largely was saying like, I'm not good at this being in charge, managing something. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. Like you can do that. And then I realized I could actually, because I found myself saying, I just want someone to tell me what to do. And I realized like, I can outsource that. I can outsource being in charge. Like I've got this unique skill, the business, and that skill may be for an advisor. Let's say that you're one of the lucky ones, and your unique skill, either you're lucky or you've worked really hard to develop it, is you just love being in front of people and you love being out, like the sort of business development work and first and second and third meetings, like that early stuff. You love that. Well, it turns out that's a really valuable and really unique and relatively rare thing to love. Like most people find that hard. Well, you could say, I love doing that. Somebody else is in charge of everything else. And now finding that person, that's hard, but Traction and Rocket Fuel have made it a little easier. So I love the idea that to make something bigger, you don't have to be a great manager. You can find someone. I think there's a corollary here too, right? Michael, like you could love the spreadsheet part of this business.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to make yourself love the crying on the couch part or the managing of the firm part. Like whatever it is that you're really good at, if you can find a way.
I would much rather have the spreadsheet part than the crying on the couch part.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that comes up all the time. We're like, I don't want to do these first meetings the way you talk about doing them, where you have to talk about values and goals. Like, you know what? It turns out you don't have to. And you could find somebody else who really loves that part. Or you could decide to build a business around not doing that part, right? So, but the idea that you don't have to manage, you don't have to be good at managing, you just have to. Oh, Dan Sullivan, last thing I'll say on this, Dan Sullivan has a great mental model for this. Anytime he found himself, anytime he was running up against an obstacle of any way, a ceiling, he learned to stop asking how and start asking who. So he says it who, not how.
Yep.
It's so powerful. If you stop asking how and you start saying, wait, who else has figured this out before? Who could know how to do this? Who would be good at this? And one of those things you can ask that about is who would be good at being in charge? Who would be good at making sure the trains run on time?
Yep.
Right. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, since getting clear on that for myself, it frankly, I think is part of what transformed the growth, just even for our platform, like just for Kitces.com. I spent almost 10 years where it was myself and 1 or 2 others at the most, because I never wanted to grow beyond that, because then I would have to manage them. And that didn't sound appealing. And so getting clear on, well, no, what that means is just if I'm going to grow, I need a managing director person, a COO style person who can drive all of that. So once I got clear on that, I found that person. And so, we're now at 19 team members. We'll probably be at 22 by the end of the year for Kitces.com. And I have 2 direct reports. My executive assistant, because really wouldn't be appropriate to have him report anywhere else, and my managing director.
Yeah.
And all of the other directors and department leads report to the managing director. They don't report to me. Now, I still have conversations with them, still involved, because I set a lot of the vision, the direction of where we're going. But, I created an organizational structure, and this is basically the Rocket Fuel org structure for people that like to be in the vision-y space. And I guess apropos to their title, like got really clear on that. 7x the business in 3 years.
Why did it take you so long to get clear about that? And
I was apparently waiting for them to write the book.
Right. Why why is it so hard for us to get our heads around that idea? Like,
well, because I think it is a mindset shift, right? Just if we live our lives a certain way, we have certain experiences. Our brains are very much wired to learn from those experiences, right? Just that's part of our survival mechanism. I touched the stove once; it was really hot and it burned me, so I don't touch stoves anymore. And so, when we have experiences, I think particularly when we have painful experiences, it kind of sears itself into our memory. Okay, lesson learned, don't do that again. And on the one hand, that's fine. Like, okay, don't touch stoves anymore. But sometimes we overreact that and take it to extreme. Like, oh, that doesn't mean I need to never own a stove. That just means I need to buy oven mitts so that I don't touch the stove anymore. And right. And we can get caught in those traps between, oh, I'm never going to cook again because I burned myself versus, no, I just need to buy oven mitts, or I didn't really enjoy managing people, therefore I can't have a larger business. No, just means you need to hire someone whose job is to manage people. Yeah. And change your structure, right? It's very much that realm of when you change your mindset, all of a sudden different paths and opportunities open up. And really would recommend, just for anybody who's thinking about this or processing this or wants to explore it, again, at least my world, I do well in a book realm. So the two for me on this really are, so Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman. We'll put this in the show notes if you want to go click through to find it. But if you're trying to scribble it down, Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman, and Who Not How, which Dan Sullivan actually did as a book with a co-author named Ben Hardy. So Who Not How, that's literally the name of the book, Who Not How. Read Who Not How and read Rocket Fuel, and just create a different mental model around yourself that says, growing more team members doesn't necessarily mean you personally have to manage more people. Mm-hmm. You're going to have at least one with whoever you're partnering or working with, but you don't really need much more than that if that's the vision of how you want to grow. Now, there are some trade-offs that go with that. Like, if you're going to have someone to run that part of the business, make those decisions, you have to actually let them do it, which means you have to find someone you trust enough to do that, which means you got to start looking out there and finding the person that you can trust. And that's a journey unto itself, and perhaps something we can talk about in a future episode. But like the change, I guess the purest sense, the change, and like what took so long and what created so much of the transformation was, until I understood that was the person I needed to look for, I wasn't looking. And as it turned out, as soon as I got clear on this could happen a different way, and I started looking, it was actually kind of disturbing how quickly I found someone to figure out how to make that happen. Right? Just it's the same phenomenon of like, you buy a new car and then like everybody seems to drive the car that you just got that you totally never noticed before. But now that you're driving one, you notice everybody else who has it as well. Just like it's a particular part of our brain that attenuates our focus, where once you're thinking about and looking for something, you notice and focus in on it more readily. When you get clear on, okay, like this could function differently and I could have a different team structure. I just need a person that does blank. And you get really clear on what that person does, it's amazing how quickly your brain can start honing in on trying to find that. I think particularly for us advisors, so we tend to be pretty good at like setting goals and going after them. So when you get clear on the goal, like you may start going after it pretty quickly once you're clear.
Yeah. That's really fascinating to me. I have found myself lately, especially like the last 18 months, as the business has gotten more formed, if you will, around how I wanted to build it, and things have gotten clearer, and I found somebody who I would think of as the who, and also as an integrator. I realized like I've started referring to it as almost like a spiritual practice, right? Like, because you learn things about yourself that if you're paying attention and you realize like it's your fault, right? Like, this is the reason this is not working is because you are doing something that's not aligned with what you're at least expressing as your goals. Now, it may be that you need to change the goals. Like maybe you don't want that thing that you thought. That's totally fine. But if you do want that thing, because I used to say all the time to my wife, Corey, I used to say, like, I could pull the plug on all this and just do, 10 speaking engagements a year. And I used to call it the like retreat to the what I used to call it, like the tree house or the yurt. I'm just going to go here and by myself. I'll have one. Actually, I won't even have an executive assistant. I will handle all my speaking. I'll just speak. I'll do it 10 times a year. That's fine. And I would go to that little retreat, the little tree house by myself for like an hour and be like, yeah, but I have a different goal. Like I really want this other thing. But I kept bumping my head against the wall. And so I started realizing like, wait, finding somebody, I tried that. And I was like, oh, I tried that. It didn't work. That was a retreat to the treehouse, right? And then I came back and I was like, well, okay, maybe you need to try again, right? What did you do wrong in that? What did I do wrong? Maybe it was 95% their fault. It was never, but maybe it was. The only thing I could focus on was the 5% that was mine, but it was normally the inverse, just to be clear. So I found that really helpful to start thinking. Like, I'll give you an example. A business coach I have told me one day, because I was having this problem. My problem was I had too many ideas. So the team would start working an idea on Friday, and on Monday I would call and change the idea. And they're like, you can never get anything done. And I was like, I don't understand. And I would even say, this is just a brainstorm. Right. And I realized, and this coach said to me, Carl, do you realize there are people who don't like to brainstorm? Like they just want to build. And I was literally like, what? I didn't know that was possible. And he went a little further. He said, do you realize that sometimes you walk into a meeting with this group of people, your team, and if you just walk in and say green and you leave, do you realize there's a whole thing that goes on? What did he mean by that? Does he want to change the green? Should we make something else green? Like there's a whole thing. And so I love this idea of like, look, if your goal is to grow freedom, income, impact, revenue, whatever the grow part is, realize you don't, that doesn't mean you have to, sometimes we're like, it doesn't mean you have to grind and it has to be 60 hours a week and you have to hate it. That you can employ some of these things we've talked about here, especially finding a person who could be the opposite side of the rocket fuel as you.
Yeah.
And then when that doesn't work, because it won't always, like when you hit bumps in the road, be aware that you're going to hit them. And when you hit them, own them and say, okay, what do I need to do differently to make this work? And then crazy things happen. Like I've had the same experience. Like the business is this will be anyway, it's all because I think we finally realized like there's rocket fuel. It takes two things to happen. And it doesn't, my business is way better now. My life is way better now. And we're growing. Like that seems like that's illegal.
Yeah, I think to me, just the essence of it, because we'd sort of kick this off in the vein of lifestyle practice. You look for, as we talked about last episode, just for those who really want a lifestyle practice, like you can do that. There are people who have created amazing lifestyle practices. Yes, you can still do that and find a way to delegate some of the things you don't like, right? There is outsourcing, tuck-ins, part-time staff, full-time staff. Just get clear on what you really need what you really need in the firm, and don't sell for anything less than finding that person or that fit or that structure. But I find there's sort of, I guess overgeneralizing a little, but like there's kind of two types of advisors. There are those that want a lifestyle practice, and there are those that kind of, I don't know, settled or satisfied for one. And I don't mean that to be pejorative to lifestyle practices, but just that I've seen advisors, and I lived a version of this where there really was kind of a dream and idea in my head that was bigger than that. I had accepted lifestyle practice as a trade-off for and a proxy for, I don't want to manage people. I don't want to deal with the complexity, the systems, the things, the stuff that's got to get created in order to do that. And that was as I kind of learned in reading books like Rocket Fuel and Who Not How, like that's not really true. That was just a script in my head.
Yeah.
And when you get a different perspective, when you get a different script, and then you go look and try to figure out how to solve for that script, you go down a very different journey. And frankly, some cool stuff tends to happen, because just in general, I find like as advisors, when we get clear on our goals, we tend to be pretty good at going after them. Just we're kind of goal setting machines as advisors. It's like it's why we like doing goals-based planning with clients. Like we like finding goals and going after them, helping other people find their goals and go after them. So you get more clarity on your goal. You know, again, we may do a whole other episode, like how do you find these people and figure some of that out. But the truth is you're probably pretty good at getting most of the way there all by yourself, once you just acknowledge and accept that's the path forward and what you're actually looking for, and get clear on what you're looking for.
I love that. I love the idea that it's just question the scripts in your head. Right. That's super cool. Thanks, Michael. That was awesome.
Likewise. Thank you, Carl.
Cheers.
Cheers.